Hello, welcome to Cerulean Arts Gallery. Tonight we are having the tour and talk for the exhibition A World of One's Own, featuring the work of Jeremy McGirl, Andie Olson, and Wanda Payne. The show is up now through February 23rd, and thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
Yeah, good to be here. Good to be
Great,
here.
thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna spotlight Tina's camera. So maybe Jeremy, we'll start with you if you want to tell us a bit about yourself and your work.
Sure. I guess a little bit about myself is I'm originally from Colorado, but now I guess I consider myself from here a little bit more. I'm about half and half. So I moved out here in like 99 with my wife from Colorado, where we were both born and raised and everything. Um, my undergrad was in Colorado from the Metropolitan State University of Denver, and it's a BFA with an emphasis in drawing. And then after we moved out here, I kind of got the itch to go back to school. I wasn't really working as an artist. I was just working a regular job and regular job. I don't know. I worked in the DuPont like automotive paint division, and I think, like being around color and stuff there, and you kind of got that. So I actually did a master class with Bo Bartlett when I was working there, and I really enjoyed visiting PAFA. And so that's when I decided to go ahead and go back to school and stuff. So I went and finished a MFA at PAFA along with a post baccalaureate program. And then now I work in my home in a studio and try to show my work as much as possible while teaching at Westchester University and Delaware County Community College. And, two kids and my wife, and my head spins some days, but I keep making stuff. So it's a pleasure to have an opportunity to kind of show that work and put it out there.
So how did you like evolve to this way you're working? I mean, when you were at the academy and stuff, I guess were you painting?
Drawing and painting mostly, yeah, as separate entities, I guess you would say. And then I was there. I don't know. You probably remember, Mike, when they decided to knock down the convention center and like expand
Yes,
there.
that's
And
right.
so um, I was doing some drawings at a window studio my last year there, looking out at that, and I kind of documented the deconstruction of that site
Wow.
across there.
Mhm.
And so I actually was doing like some line pencil drawings, and then I would paint the skies on there and everything. So I think like then you get like, oh, that mixed media kind of vibe. And
Mhm.
that's been a while now, but I think that's just kind of the feeds that idea of exploration and just play. So I just kind of grab everything around the studio. Um, so I kind of started cutting like this paper. It's based on a forsythia plant that I clipped in our backyard, and I kind of did it. And to me, it was just like this blank slate of information. And then I was really interested in the idea of layers, and each layer kind of representing like a an experience, and then how like in life every experience kind of affects the previous experiences, and it's just kind of this accumulation or assembly of moments to kind of create like this specific moment in time for me. So I really like the idea of actually having those physical layers, having some information like, hey, it's a forsythia plant, but it's either one color or it's white or anything. So there's not like all the information there. So you only get like enough to kind of intrigue you, hopefully. And then hopefully there's enough like hide and seek inside those layers to really draw you in and have you kind of searching around and finding the little tidbits that are there that are just not seen from far away.
They have a very sculptural quality.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit more and more. I think, originally they kind of started a little bit more flat, a little less color. And then over the last probably 5 years, the color started to really creep in and like playing with that idea of like having those pops and flashes of color and then color relationships. I like the idea of playing with that colored paper too, for instance, on like a gallery wall like yours where it's nice and white, if it's lit, the piece becomes an interactive piece because you get all sorts of like reflected light in the shadows and it becomes an experience there and it interacts with the space. Um, and then I think there's one on the other side, other wall in the gallery where it is full blown sculptural kind of nest in there. And so I think that's probably the most recent evolution in the last probably year or two, is really kind of bulking up that three-dimensional quality to come into that real space a little bit more.
Well, thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
So we'll come back to you, but maybe Andie, if you could tell us about yourself.
Sure. So I grew up in Bucks County. I've always been, a lot of artists say this, but I've been making art forever. It's just always been my thing. I did start off in undergrad at a Penn State satellite campus, more like a graphic design major. I think I was just drawn to the design elements and I love color. But I just decided that painting was my passion. So I switched over, I changed schools. I went to Moore College of Art and ended up getting my degree there in painting. Then I stuck around the area for a while, but I actually moved out to Phoenix, Arizona, and lived out there for 7 years. And it was an amazing experience. I actually ended up working at an art center, and I was the program manager there. So I got a glimpse of all the inside work that goes into putting up exhibitions and just being a real part of the art world. So while I was there, I was continuing to work and show my art. But I moved back to the area about 3 years ago, and this is when I've really landed on this style that I'm working on now. I would say even through college and like afterwards, I was really working on finding my voice. And now I feel like I've landed on it. So this has been a really awesome discovery for me. So the possibilities are endless with this series, but as you can see, there's all different variations, but I feel like they're really cohesive. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, color seems to be the dominant force here.
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, color is like my first love. But kind of like just to give an idea of the process, which I kind of like, and it works well for me because I'm restrained but also have freedom. So when I begin the paintings, I actually lay out a composition with from images that I've taken of nature, of macro photography. So everything is super up close. And then I take the photographs and I lay them out and create a composition. So that gives me basically a format to work off of. Everything's laid out for me, but then from there, that's when I go in with the color and I start making like what I'd call the big decisions because every single color I put, let's just say like the yellow you're seeing there, once I put that down, it affects everything else in the painting. So I'm really working around the entire painting the whole time, thinking about, what's next? What is that going to do to the whole composition? And it's a really interesting process. And also I often think about like how different they could be if I did the same exact composition with different colors because, it would be completely different composition.
And you're working with like watercolor and acrylic and
Yeah, it depends what I'm working on because sometimes I'll work on wood. So when I work on wood, I do pretty much just acrylic. But when I work on paper or like illustration board, I'm usually just using watercolor. And then also on this, like some of the outlines you're seeing there, I actually use like an acrylic marker to add like a little more punch to the edges sometimes.
well, great. Thanks so much, Andie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hello, Wanda.
Yes, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, hello everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, as I text Mike a few minutes ago, my life is ever evolving, which is why I'm an artist. My start began early childhood. So the meat of my knowledge comes from a early age. My mother involved me in everything art. So from the um, Saturday programs to summer programs to after school programs. So I participated in the Philadelphia Art Camp, which actually a lot of Philly artists came out of that camp, as well as classes at TCA, as well as classes at PAFA. And this is all through my childhood, all the way up. I had teachers like Charles Cyril. So, and mostly, again, it's just so layered. Mostly, person who probably shaped me the most would be a gentleman by the name of Leslie Camathon, who was actually running the public school art program. So I studied under him for a good 3 years. So by the time I got to college, my first year of college, I hate to say it, but I was bored and I didn't know what else to do but goof. So I had to be the big girl and decide what was I going to do. So I actually ended up getting a job. Was kind of disappointed with the whole college experience, but I still stayed in the art world. So I did visual display for many years, and the other times I just painted and drew for myself. I knew I wasn't going to have the same task that everyone else had, but it didn't stop me. I didn't know where it was going. I just knew that art was who I was. It was what I was, and it kept me going. Yeah, there's so many interesting stories which also helped to shape me as an artist. One of the more memorable ones would be more recent. I would say around 2011. I just could not focus enough as far as working with figurative images, subject matter. And I just kind of started doodling, and I figured nobody's going to see this. And I took all that knowledge that I had and I began to apply thick and thin line, one color, monochromatic tones with it. And I continued to add until I had a full palette. I didn't start doing the full palette until maybe a year later, but I was someplace that I'd never been before and that I was absolutely in love. Now the trick was, how do I introduce this to my other artist friends? Because a lot of people were still figurative. Again, art is it's more of a lifestyle. It's who you are. So and fast forward now, I'm in a place where I still need it to survive. And when I say that, I really mean that. I need it to survive. So my pieces are smaller right now, but it is essentially where I am right now. I hope that's good. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Wanda.
You're welcome.
So, Jeremy, I was going to ask you, in your statement, you mentioned that you explore the gaps and smudges of memory, where reality, perception, and experience converge, where things are both lost and found. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think it kind of goes back to just the idea of me really wanting that physical layer in there, right? And again, when I work, I just kind of I cut a bunch of parts and have these experiences. And while my pieces don't necessarily represent like a specific moment or experience, to me, they're that idea of um, covering. And so a little bit of like a revealing and concealing. And so to me, that's like just the way life and memory kind of works, is where one future experience really can change how you remember something, or how you remember something not exactly how it really happened. And everybody can have that different kind of point of view and different perspective. But neither of us never, not necessarily be right or wrong, but this is just how we interpret that experience. And I think like the layers in the work, whether it's a collage piece or a drawing or a painting, just kind of allow you to kind of filter in and then maybe peek around the corner of a layer and kind of see that gap or that smudge and go, oh, there's that gap. There's that piece that maybe fills in something that you didn't see from a different point of view or a different perspective. And so I think like it's the idea that like not everything is straightforward. Everything kind of has multi kind of points of view, multifaceted layers that sometimes somebody will see it this way and other times somebody will see it that way. But it's not right or wrong. It's just how we kind of remember things and how future layers of experience kind of affect past and past memories. I don't know. Probably went in a circle there, but
No, it's fine. And why is bird imagery important to you?
yeah, that's interesting. I think, it kind of goes to the idea of like just being attracted to and trying to collect like the small kind of things. And I say collect, I used to just, we would go on hikes and stuff a lot, less and less now that your life is busier and stuff. But I would always collect feathers and everything. And it's just that idea of like this collected moment of a feather, which has ended kind of its original job, which was on the bird, but then I've stumbled across it and I've kind of picked it up and caught my eye, whether it was color or shape or something. And so I collect those kind of moments, and then it was drawn to the birds. And then most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, they're kind of local backyard birds and stuff. And it kind of goes to that idea of that everything, everyday kind of object that's just normal and sort of in a way taken for granted, that maybe we can grab onto and recognize. And hopefully for me, it becomes that passage into the work, because there's a lot of abstractness to it to me, where yes, it's forsythia, or yes, it's a bird, but then I'm covering it and concealing it and revealing it. But I like to give those little moments that hopefully everybody can gravitate towards. And I think I kind of landed on the idea of that forsythia with the birds and stuff too, a little bit as a primary like subject matter. We used to have a whole line of like forsythia bushes in our backyard, and you would hear hundreds of birds or whatever, but you would never see them. And so it's that idea of like, it's there, but you don't really understand it. You don't see it. So a layer that's a little bit mysterious, but is real.
Right. Well, thank you, Jeremy.
Sure. Thank you.
So, Andie, in your statement, you make reference to paying homage to the tradition of women's craft, and your obsessive attention to detail allows you to delve deeper into your psyche and captivate the viewer into your world of deep female mindfulness. So can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, it's a lot in one in one sentence, but basically, I mean, if I'm talking about more from like a process sense, it's the work that I do is it's not repetitive, like maybe like a woman's craft would be like knitting or something like that, but there's such detail to it, and there are parts that are really like I don't want to say monotonous, but where I really need to get into the detail and work and concentrate, that while I'm making the piece myself, I enter what would be probably considered a meditative state. But my goal is to sort of transfer that to people that are looking at it. So by them taking the time, maybe not as long as it took me to make it, but just taking the time to look at the detail and take it in, they will be rewarded because there's a lot in there that you might not notice at first. I don't do a lot of like realistic elements. Like you're not going to look in there and see like, oh, there's a ladybug in there or something like that. But there's a lot to find with the subtlety of color and changes and things that are just maybe hidden or washed over that you don't see at first glance. So the idea is to draw someone into more of a meditative state so that they have the time to reflect on their own lives and reflect on, whatever's going on in their life at the time and what that painting means to them. So I really like to keep it open-ended, and I like to let people interpret it their own way. Um, so it's really interesting to hear what people think when they look at individual pieces. But that's sort of the idea. It's like the transfer of my feeling to them, hopefully.
Well, thank you, Andie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And Wanda, I wanted to ask you, in your statement, you make mention that your engagement with materials in the creative process, you seek to reveal hidden truths about your identity and discover your true self in contrast to societal expectations. Can you speak about that?
Yes. I even want to pull on something that Andie just said, something about that meditative state. Once I pulled away from figurative, and again, I'm not knocking figurative. I still love it. It's just that as of now, this abstract state fits where I am in my life. So, yeah, once I began to focus on that meditative state, the work blossomed. I no longer was concerned with what it looked like. It became what it felt like. And what it felt like for me was easier to was easier to speak of, was easier to demonstrate as far as what it felt like, as far as the things that I'm experiencing in life. Always felt like a outside artist, and I don't mean in the sense of untrained. Outside meaning I remember taking classes and being in college drawing class, and my teacher said, "Oh, you people always look so ethnic." Yeah. But during the 80s, that was not uncommon, which is also if you want to know, one of the reasons why I ended up having to pull out of school, because I didn't know how to deal with feeling and being different. I thought I was just like everyone else, but I got to school and realized, oh, I'm different. So from there, I began to speak about my life. I began to speak about who I am, and I stopped shying away from drawing things that may have appeared too ethnic. I mean, what else am I going to draw? But in the 80s and the 90s, that still was an issue because your work was supposed to look like everyone else's work. So to be able to do this and to just let whatever is there come out, because I've even had people say, wow, I see a sense of Afrocentricity. I see Asiatic influences. I see, and I just let it go. It doesn't, I no longer, and it's still a process. to break it down, to just reveal who you actually are. Did not realize that I had so many layers and I was just hiding and masking. But the more I pulled back, the more I like it and the more it makes sense to continue to do it. Yeah, just finding who you are authentically. That's the goal. That's the goal, guys. Yeah. Yeah. I hope that answered.
Yeah, thank you, Wanda.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So I want to ask all three of you, so you didn't know each other before this show.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, like, to know your thoughts about the show and your work in relation with the other artists. And if you had questions for each other, that would be fine too.
I think it was really nice to meet everybody on Saturday at the opening. And I'm just impressed with like the way you and Tina arranged the show and put it together and must have had a vision for like seeing the snippets of the work in separate places, where I feel like it's a really wonderful balance of three individuals that can kind of play in the same place, and they can draw together as a group, but also when you walk around, you can pick out whose is whose, and then also kind of just talk to that person in that one piece, but also see the thing. I think there's ideas of layers and color, and complexities balanced with that draw from a distance, and the ability to focus and draw a viewer into each individual piece. And I think that was a nice, like when you came in and you see the arrangement and you kind of see, two of Wanda's, one of mine, then another of Andie's, and then that rotation through, you just kind of take it in as the whole from a distance. And so like the whole show is kind of like a larger version of each individual piece in a way. So like you take it all in as a whole, and then you dive deeper and you find all the little snippets and hidden things and all the little layers and gems that if you didn't go up and kind of see, you would miss in each individual piece. And the show's kind of like that to me.
Well, I also feel like it really shows how far you can take abstraction because all of our pieces, I feel like really they could stand alone, but even when they're together, they're strong. So I think that it's also about, our individual identities that we've found through our work and how they really speak to us individually, but then also abstract art as a whole in the sense that there's like the possibilities are endless. They reflect exactly who you are. So I think it's very interesting to see abstract art that we have similar themes going on, but we really have our own thing too, which is it's really cool, I think.
Yes. Yes. For me, what I find, I'm in absolute awe over, and also I'm quite joyous. I see how this tethered connection, us as individuals, how we are still very connected. So I am excited to be in the room with other abstract artists and other abstract artists who are different, but see the world in this beautiful array of color. It's just absolutely wonderful. And I love both of your bodies of work. Just want you to know that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Feelings
You're
mutual.
welcome. Yeah.
Wanda, could I get you to talk a bit about your scratch board process a little bit?
Scratch board. Yeah. That happened quite by accident. Actually, a customer, I don't know if you guys know, I also sold art supplies. So a customer brought in a pack of smaller sheets of scratch paper. And, So I was returning it. So I asked, my manager, hey, do you mind if I have this? He said, yeah. And I don't know what I was expecting. I was just kind of expecting to just goof around, but it was something about the sensation of that scratchiness. You From the time you lay your knife down, you feel it all the way up. And I love how engaging it is because it forces you to think reverse at times. So yeah, I kind of fell in love with it. So again, I started off with just basic, simple sheets, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to go for the real stuff, and I went for this particular product. They have both ink as well as clay boards, which you can now add India ink to it. And also I kind of researched how clay board or scratch board came about and the history, and I just said, whoa, and it really goes pretty deep. So this definitely answers my black and white graphic type of appetite that I've always had. A lot of my abstract pieces started with basic black lines. So just working on a black surface and just scratching into, and not even having any type of idea, just kind of knowing, all right, I want to have a mass here, a mass, there, and just going through the process. So for me, it's so satisfying because I never know what I'm going to have. And I think that's the best part about it. I do have a handful of pieces which were deliberate, and I actually took time to lay out the actual drawing and go into. But say, for instance, the one you're looking at now, I started with a white clay surface. I just threw the ink on it and started scratching away. It also opens itself up to acrylic ink or acrylic paint because that clay surface is so delicious and it just absorbs the color and it holds it. And then you can scratch in on that. So the things that you can do with it is just endless. And that's what I like about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And did you have questions for each other?
Andie, are you mainly watercolor or do you also practice other mediums?
So I mostly for this series, I'm working in watercolor. Sometimes I'll do acrylic if it's on the wood surface, depending. But I also paint some realistic, a little bit more impressionist style, and I will use oil for that. So I'm kind of all over I love to experiment with mediums. So, and I love printmaking as well. So I try to throw that into the mix sometimes. But this is mostly watercolor that you're seeing.
And Andie, you said you had like photographs, right? Like laid out.
Yeah, so when I take a hike, I'm like the last thing I'm looking, which I feel like most people is like the big scene. So if you're like on an overlook or something like that, I'm like off to the side looking at like the branches, like, twisting together or like this little patch of moss or something. So that's what I get the photographs from. I take them all myself, and print them and use them kind of as like just a base for the composition. But one of the goals when I set my composition down is to really use it to my advantage. So I will erase things, I will add things, whatever I need to do to get that particular composition going, you know, I use it for what I need to. So
And do you make like a study of your composition and then transfer that, or do you like work it up on the piece itself, like from your various sources?
That's a good question. I basically, on the piece itself, what I started off with was a really spiral composition. My first one was the one titled Worlds Within Worlds, and super tight spiral. And then from there, I've kind of kept with the spiral, but just like let it loose a little bit. So it is mostly just kind of laying it down on the piece itself and seeing what happens. Um,
Mm.
it's almost how I deal with my colors. It's like I'll put one thing down and then feed off of that. So it's the same thing when I'm putting the image down. I'm like, now I have this big leaf here. What do I do? You know? So, and that's how I kind of approach my color too. I have this patch of purple down. Where do I go with that? So it's almost like I don't really have control. I feel like I have control over it, but I don't. It's informing me. So it's interesting.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, Jerry?
Jeremy?
Jeremy.
Jeremy. I'm sensing more of a almost like a graphic or industrial type of feel from your work.
Hmm. I don't know.
In
I don't think of them as industrial. I do think of them as like abstractions, and I think of like I like how Andie was talking about the layers, and then like you have all these reference photos, but you're very like specific. Like you don't need all that information, and so maybe a little bit like my process, especially I do painting, I do drawing, and then I have these kind of sculptural mixed media pieces, and I don't know where it's gonna go. So like I have this stencil of the Forsythia that I made. I liked it based on an observation snip. And some days I teach two classes and I'll come home and I don't really feel like, but I gotta get something done in the studio. So I'll just get out the color paper and I'll just trace it and I just cut paper, cut paper, cut paper. And then I have all these pieces. I don't have any idea where they'll go.
Yeah,
And
I
so
love
there
your
is maybe a production side, like I make, and then I assemble, and I have to play with those assemblies and test colors and play with the gaps and the negative space between those and make those decisions. And then is it going to glue flat? Is it going to pop up and be sculptural? So I guess maybe I have a little bit of that, if that's what you mean by industrial sense. Like there's a production side of it where I'm making a lot of stuff, and then the assembly kind of happens in a second step.
yeah, that's more of it. And I love that your work has depth. Almost go inside of.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I hope that like it sucks you in, draws you in, and then you kind of can see the physicality of the layers maybe, and um understand a little bit of what's been covered up or what's been changed by the things that are on the outside, but really kind of get in there and see, I guess, my scratch board work, is that idea of like scratching and weaving it together and then kind of settling on a place for it.
So this,
Yeah.
Jeremy, is the most recent one, which is very sculptural. Is that?
Yeah, it's one of the more recent pieces. Yeah. I
Wow.
love that shot of the shadows.
Yeah, the shadows are very important to the.
Yeah. Yeah, so I kind of try and plan, even if it's more of a flat piece, like some way the piece interacts with the environment that it's put into, whether it's a cast shadow or a reflected light or some other kind of variation on that, which I think is also a factor in the idea of it's a plant, and we can kind of tell it's a plant, or there's a bird or a tree or something in there. And so I think there is a side of the work that also speaks to like nature and environment, and the idea that I'm doing all these kind of fragile materials in the paper is a little bit of a tip to that sensitivity and fragility of nature and how it can be malleable and changed. And I'm exposing that. It's not under glass, it's not framed, it's not boxed up, and so it's out there, and it could very easily be damaged in a lot of ways. So, so I like that kind of play where it's exposed. It feels exposed and out there. So putting out yourself, and then also the idea of that nature and our place in that nature, and what we can do to manipulate it or affect it one way or the other.
Mhm.
I'd just ask maybe where are you guys headed next? Like what do we feel like the next step is with your art? Is anybody at a point where they're like changing it up, or we work, kind of continuing? I'm just out of curiosity.
I I do everything all the time.
Right.
So yes, there's new like iterations of things and stuff, but um they like I have another show coming up later this year somewhere else, and like they're getting everything, and so it'll feel a little bit different, but um it's nice to kind of see these little bodies of works, or I consider like every work in my studio part of me, and like it doesn't matter if it's just a graphite drawing or just a painting of a seashell, or it's this kind of mixed media sculptural piece. It's that idea of like it's just all my experience and a little bit of me, and so it's nice to kind of see where a pocket like this where I can group it together, and then Mike, you have to group it with other artists and stuff, and it leaves the studio and is kind of out there to have its own experience. And then this other body of work, they're going to get everything, and it's going to feel different, and the connections that viewers will make with it, um, like will be different, and but they're all from me as an artist. And so I have a hard time, like I don't know that there's a big shift coming. It's just this constant like showing up at the page, because life is just crazy. You can't predict one day if I'll get an hour in the studio or if I'll get 8 hours in the studio and stuff. And so yeah, I don't know, it's a great question to kind of think about, like where you're going or where you've been and what's next. But I just kind of come into the studio and do what grabs my attention that day, I guess. I don't know, how about you, Andie?
Oh, well, for me, I'm not any big shift, but I do want to do some really large pieces. That's my next step. I used to paint really large in college, and I kind of got to the point where I was doing these tiny pieces, and now I feel like I want to expand again. My paintings are pretty labor, like they take a long time to make, so I need to really commit to something larger, but I think it would be really interesting to try that out. So that's really my next goal is to go like 4 foot by 4 foot or something like that.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, push that scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. I too would love to go larger. I had maybe a year or 2 years with practicing larger. That 36 by 36 was probably the smallest I had during that 2 year period. But, as I told my story, when I became my mom's caregiver, I had to bring it down. I had to bring my sizes down, because my working space became limited. So if it didn't fit on my lap, you know, yeah. So I'm hoping that in the future that I can begin the process of also working larger. But for right now, I'm able to turn out these little pieces like crazy. So, and I love the challenge of a larger piece. It makes you think differently. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Well, Andie, Jeremy, Wanda, thank you so much for a wonderful show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Beautiful
Thank
show.
you.
Yeah.
And the show is up through February 23rd. We hope people come down to check it out. And everything's also available on our website, ceruleanarts.com. And thanks again for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Take care and have a good night.
All
You
right.
too.
Bye.